Right now we're going to put together all the hardware that we need for our project. Most of the stuff for the Raspberry Pi comes in this Can Kit box, which makes setting that up nice and easy. We're going to start by taking out the plastic case and then taking off the top cover. You'll see there's still a partial case inside of it, and you need to take that middle layer out, put the Pi underneath it, and then put the middle layer back. That's going to take some effort. From my experience, the case is a little hard to take apart and put back. You can see here I'm struggling a bit with the case. What ended up working was to get it open a little bit, and then you can use that to leverage it open, and then you put the thing in, and then to get it back on, you need to put it flat on a hard surface and then push to get it back on. Since there's no protruding stuff inside, you're not going to hurt your Pi, don't worry too much about that. So yeah, this footage was sped up a bit, so you can imagine how long it took to get this part done finally. But look, now it's nice in the partial case, and most of the parts are still accessible while being covered by a nice plastic thing. And then you have that top cover that you can put on when you're not developing. Okay, now that the case is all put together, you can start adding the peripherals to your Raspberry Pi. You want to start off with the SD card, which, if you're using the Can Kit stuff, already has the Raspberry Pi setup stuff installed. So you want to take it out of the anti-static silver bag and then put it into the computer. The slot for doing that is on the side of the case. There's a little divot, and then if you look inside, there's like a rectangular hole. You want to put the SD card inside of the hole so that the writing is visible if you view it from the bottom. It shouldn't go in the other way, so it's pretty easy to figure out, but I think if you put too much force in it, you can break it and put it in the wrong way. I don't think it breaks the actual hardware. I think you just need to use it's difficult to get out. And of course, it won't be readable by the computer. The next things that you want to attach are going to be the monitor and your keyboard and your mouse. So you can see here I already have my keyboard out, and then I'm taking out my monitor right now. You can use whatever monitor is available as long as it has an HDMI input, because the Raspberry Pi has HDMI output, and the Can Kit comes with a cable, I believe. So yeah, you can see here I'm just plugging it into the HDMI output on the side. Everything with this case is nice and labeled, so it's easy to find out where you need to plug things in. And then over here I'm plugging in my mouse and my USB keyboard. These are the easiest things to get started with on the Raspberry Pi, but if you don't have any of these things, it's still possible to use the Raspberry Pi through a virtual connection. It's a little more complicated to set up, so I'll link an article that goes through that in the description. Once you've plugged in all your peripherals, it's now time to power on your Raspberry Pi. You can do that by using the power adapter that's included in the Can Kit. This is specific to the Raspberry Pi 3B+, which is the hardware that I'm working with right now. I know the Raspberry Pi 4 does have a different connector. So you can see once I've powered it on, my monitor is getting signal, and you have these two options if you haven't set up Wi-Fi on your Raspberry Pi. If you do set up Wi-Fi, a couple more options are going to show up, but for our project, we're going to be using the full OS, which comes included on the SD card without having to access anything external through the Wi-Fi. It'll run you through a couple setup options like language and keyboard, and give you the option again for Wi-Fi, and then it will run you through a couple download screens. I believe at this point you also have the opportunity to set up your username and password. The default username and passwords are Pi and Raspberry, but it's highly recommended that you change those, especially if you're going to be connected through a virtual connection, which is how we plan to use our Pis for the rest of the project. The download is going to take a while, so now is the perfect time to get started on the wiring on the breadboard that you're going to need to set up the level shifter to connect the Raspberry Pi GPIO pins to the color changing LEDs. So the circuit we're using for reference is in the top left corner of the screen. We basically want to build the exact same thing that we see in this picture here. That picture was from the Adafruit website that goes over how to use NeoPixels with the Raspberry Pi. I'll put a link to that in the description as well. Okay, now that we have the stuff that's just the chip and the breadboard, we want to connect the lights. So you can look at the computer chip inside of the lights, and the wires coming out of it are labeled. You want to put the black wire for ground into the appropriate side. If you hold it the same way we're holding it in the video, you should be able to match things up. Okay, and then that other wire would be the +5, so that's the power voltage. And then the middle one, that's the crucial one, that's where the data goes in. So it's based on the behavior of the middle wire that the lights will actually change color. Now we want to connect those to their same position from the photo. And now we can connect the Raspberry Pi. One of the wires from the GPIO pins goes to ground, and the other one goes to the chip. Finally, we're going to connect our battery pack. The lights need 12 volts, so we're going to use 4 AA batteries. You can simply connect those into the power rails of the breadboard. Now that you're done with the wiring, you can return to the Raspberry Pi. The OS probably finished downloading, and then you get this welcome screen. After that, you're greeted with the desktop image. And once you get to this point, this is where all the forms I talked about earlier with the language settings and the Wi-Fi and the username show up. After this, you can follow the prompts on the screen to finish your setup, and you'll be good to go.